Imagine walking into a restaurant where every waiter avoids one table. Not because it's reserved, but because the man sitting there is a billionaire known for humiliating anyone who dares serve him. He's powerful, arrogant, and feared by everyone, except one new waitress, a young black woman, on her very first day, who didn't just serve his food, she stood her ground. What happened next shocked the entire room, and even the billionaire himself. Money can buy almost everything, but it can't buy respect. Those words echoed like a secret inside the walls of La Royale, the most expensive restaurant in the city. It was the kind of place where chandeliers dripped with crystals, violins played softly in the background, and the scent of roasted lamb and fresh herbs floated through the air. Wealthy men in tailored suits sat at polished wooden tables, their wives in glittering dresses by their side, sipping glasses of imported wine. It was a place for power, for show, for the elite. But where he walked in, the entire atmosphere changed. Victor Dellington. The name alone made hearts skip, not out of admiration, but out of dread. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was the billionaire, owner of hotels, shopping malls, and luxury apartments that towered over the city skyline. His face had been on magazine covers, his name whispered in boardrooms, and his bank account could crush anyone who dared oppose him. But for all his wealth, Victor was infamous for one thing: his cruelty. He had the kind of presence that turned laughter into silence. Whenever he stepped through the glass doors of La Royale, waiters froze mid-step. Chefs peeked nervously from the kitchen. Even the manager, a man who had served royalty before, would lower his head like a schoolboy caught misbehaving. Nobody wanted to serve him. Nobody wanted to look him in the eye. Because Victor Dellington didn't just eat meals. He devoured people's pride. He insulted the food, mocked the staff, and once even reduced a young waiter to tears in front of the entire restaurant, just because the soup was 1 degree too warm. Everyone had learned the same painful lesson. Stay quiet, obey, and pray the billionaire leaves quickly. That night, the restaurant was packed. The sound of glasses clinking and polite chatter filled the air until the front doors opened with a dramatic push. Victor had arrived. He strolled in wearing a navy blue suit that looked like it cost more than a year's rent. His shoes clicked sharply against the marble floor, his gold watch glimmering under the chandelier lights. People avoided eye contact, pretending to be engrossed in their meals. Waiters ducked behind counters, secretly hoping someone else would be assigned to his table. The manager's smile twitched nervously as he whispered to the head waiter, "He's here again. Make sure nothing goes wrong tonight." But little did anyone know, tonight would not be like the others. Because tonight there was someone new. Her name was Maya. She was just 23 years old, and this was her first day as a waitress at La Royale. Unlike the other staff who had worked there for years, Maya didn't yet know the unspoken rules. She didn't know that when Victor arrived, you either avoided his table or obeyed him without question. She walked into the restaurant earlier that evening with her hair tied neatly back, her uniform freshly pressed, and a nervous but determined smile on her face. This job wasn't just a paycheck for her. It was survival. Her mother was in the hospital, battling illness. Her younger brother needed school fees. Rent was piling up. Maya had applied to dozens of places, but when she landed this position at the city's most prestigious restaurant, she promised herself she would work hard, stay professional, and never let anyone break her spirit. So when the manager pulled her aside, whispering in panic, "Maya, don't go near the man in the corner table. He's difficult," she only frowned slightly. "Difficult how?" she asked. The manager glanced nervously toward Victor, who was already settling into his usual seat, tapping his fingers impatiently against the table. You'll see. Whatever you do, don't talk back to him. Don't argue. Just nod, smile, and keep moving." Maya nodded, but in her heart, she didn't fully understand. She believed every customer deserved respect, but she also believed respect went both ways. She couldn't imagine a man so powerful that everyone trembled in his presence, but she was about to find out. The moment Victor sat down, his sharp voice sliced through the air. "Where is the service? Do I need to wave a stack of cash in the air before someone notices me?" Heads turned. Waiters froze. Everyone looked at each other, silently begging for someone else to step forward. And then Maya's voice broke the silence. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" Her words were polite, calm, and steady, but in that single moment, the restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Every pair of eyes darted to Maya, wide with disbelief. Didn't she know who he was? Didn't she realize what she had just done? Victor turned his head slowly, like a lion disturbed during a nap. His cold blue eyes narrowed as they landed on the young woman standing before him, not trembling, not avoiding his gaze, but simply smiling politely. For a moment, he said nothing. He studied her calm expression, her steady hands holding the order pad, the quiet dignity in her posture. And then a cruel smile spread across his lips. Finally, he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. A new face. Let's see how long you last before you run off crying like the rest of them. The staff behind Maya winced. They had seen this play before. They knew what was coming, but Maya didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her pen, her voice even. What would you like to order, sir? Victor's eyebrows rose. Nobody ever ignored his threats. Nobody ever answered him so calmly. He leaned back in his chair, amused, as if watching a game about to begin. Around them, guests whispered. Waiters exchanged worried glances. Some even felt pity for the new girl. They assumed she would be broken within minutes, just like all the others before her. But they didn't know Maya. She had faced hunger. She had faced rejection. She had faced the pain of watching her mother struggle for breath in a hospital bed. To her, a rude man in a fancy suit was nothing compared to battles she was already fighting in life. And so, she stood tall, pen ready, waiting for his order. That single moment, that small act of courage, was a spark that would ignite a confrontation the entire city would talk about. Because on that night, in that glittering restaurant where everyone bowed to money and power, one young black waitress was about to prove a truth that Victor Dellington had never faced before. Respect is not bought. It is earned. The storm had raged for weeks. Victor Dellington had thrown everything he could at Maya, money, threats, lies, and power. He expected her to crumble. After all, that was how he had silenced everyone before. But this time, something was different. Every attack only seemed to shine a brighter light on Maya's courage. Every smear attempt was answered by thousands of voices defending her. And though Maya herself felt the weight of exhaustion, she carried herself each day with the same quiet dignity that had started it all. Then came the night that changed everything. The restaurant was packed. Guests filled every table. Journalists lingered outside, and the atmosphere buzzed with expectation. People weren't just there for food anymore. They were there for a symbol. They wanted to see the woman who had stood up to a billionaire and refused to bow. Maya tied her apron and walked onto the floor, her heart pounding. She had grown used to the stares, the whispers, the applause. But tonight, something in the air felt sharper, more electric. Halfway through her shift, the doors opened, and in strode Victor Dellington himself. The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks clinked against plates. Every eye turned toward the tall, broad-shouldered man in a tailored black suit. His presence carried the same arrogance as always, but this time there was something else in his eyes. Desperation. He walked straight to the very table where it all began, the one every waiter had once avoided. He sat down heavily, his jaw clenched, and waited. The manager's face went pale. He whispered urgently to Maya, "Don't do it. Let someone else serve him. Please." But Maya shook her head. "No, this started with me. It ends with me." She lifted a tray, steadied her breath, and approached the table. Victor looked up at her, his lips curling into a bitter smile. Well, the fearless waitress. Do you know how much trouble you've caused me?" Maya didn't flinch. "You caused your own trouble, Mr. Dellington. I just stopped pretending I was afraid of you." The room held its breath. Victor's face twitched with anger. For years, no one had dared speak to him that way. But before he could reply, a voice from the back called out, "She's right." Heads turned. A man in a chef's uniform stepped forward. One of Victor's former employees, fired years ago after speaking against him. "She's the first person to say what we've all been thinking." Another voice chimed in. Then another. Soon, the restaurant echoed with people standing, one by one, sharing stories of how Victor had mistreated them, workers, vendors, even former business partners. Each testimony chipped away at the image of invincibility Victor had built around himself. And the cameras were rolling. Journalists had slipped inside with their recorders. Phones were raised high, streaming the moment live. The world wasn't just watching. It was bearing witness. Victor's fist slammed against the table. "Enough," he roared. "You think any of this matters? I'm Victor Dellington. I built the city skyline. I can buy and sell every one of you." But his words didn't land the way they used to. Instead of fear, they were met with silence, then a wave of murmurs, then outright laughter. Because in that moment, everyone could see the truth. He wasn't powerful. He was desperate. And Maya, standing tall with nothing but her apron and her voice, looked stronger than the billionaire who had once been untouchable. She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm, carrying across the room. "Respect isn't something you can buy, Mr. Dellington. And tonight you've lost it. Not because of me, but because people finally see who you really are." Victor's face turned red, his breath ragged. For the first time in his life, he looked small. The fallout was swift. The videos from that night spread across the internet faster than anything before. Clips of Maya's final words were replayed on television, shared in classrooms, quoted in boardrooms. Workers across the city and beyond spoke up about their own experiences with abusive employers, many citing Maya as their inspiration. Victor's empire began to crack. Business partners pulled away, unwilling to be associated with his crumbling reputation. Investigations into his companies uncovered years of shady dealings. The man who once towered over everyone now found himself cornered, his power slipping like sand through his fingers. And Maya? She didn't become rich. She didn't suddenly live a life of luxury. Instead, she became something far more lasting. A voice that people trusted. Invitations poured in for her to speak at events, interviews with major networks, offers to join organizations fighting for workers' rights. But through it all, she stayed grounded. She kept working at the restaurant, greeting customers with the same warmth, caring for her family, and reminding herself that courage wasn't about grand speeches. It was about the small moments when you choose to stand firm. One evening, as she walked home with her brother Daniel, he looked up at her with admiration. "You know, Maya," he said, "you didn't just stand up to him. You stood up for all of us." Maya smiled softly. "I didn't do it alone. It only mattered because people decided to stand with me." She glanced at the night sky, the city lights glowing around them, and whispered to herself, "Fear doesn't last. But dignity does, and that, my friends, is a story of how one billionaire's arrogance was defeated not by money, not by power, but by the courage of a young waitress who refused to bow. It's a reminder for all of us. You don't need wealth or status to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is one voice saying, "Enough." If you found this story inspiring, let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Maya's shoes? And don't forget, like this video, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next one. Because stories like this are just the beginning. Victor Dellington was not a man who forgave. For decades, his fortune had allowed him to crush rivals, silence critics, and by loyalty, politicians, journalists, even entire corporations. When Victor wanted someone gone, they disappeared from relevance like smoke in the wind. So when a waitress made him look weak in front of an audience, and worse, the entire world, his pride screamed for blood. The first strike was quiet. Suppliers stopped delivering to the restaurant. A delivery truck driver muttered that orders got redirected. The meat shipments were delayed. The produce came wilted. Overnight, the smooth operations of the once prestigious dining hall descended into chaos. The manager, Mr. Lewis, paced the kitchen furiously. "This isn't coincidence," he muttered, throwing paperwork onto the counter. "Someone's pulling strings." Everyone knew who. No one dared say it aloud. The second strike was louder. Health inspectors arrived unannounced, armed with clipboards and stern faces. They combed through the kitchen, measuring temperatures, checking sinks, snapping photos of the tiniest specks of dust. At one point, one inspector whispered to another, not realizing Maya was within earshot, Word came from upstairs. Shut them down if you can. By the end of the night, the restaurant had a warning slapped on its door. Violations pending review. The third strike was personal. Maya's landlord, usually kind and patient, knocked on her door with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Maya, but I've been pressured to terminate your lease. Someone offered to buy the building outright if I didn't evict you. I can't fight that kind of money." Maya's heart sank. "But where are we supposed to go?" she asked, glancing toward her brother Daniel, who sat at the kitchen table, trying not to look scared. The landlord shook his head helplessly. "You got 30 days. I'm truly sorry." It didn't stop there. Online, anonymous accounts began spreading lies. Claims that Maya had staged a confrontation for fame, that she was secretly paid by Victor's rivals, that she had a criminal record she didn't. One doctored photo even showed her supposedly pocketing money from a customer's wallet. The comments piled up. Some defended her. Others turned cruel, echoing the lies. Maya scrolled through the chaos late at night, her chest tight. "They're trying to make me the villain," she whispered. Daniel clenched his fists. "Don't listen to them, Maya. They're scared of you because you told the truth. That's all this is." But Maya couldn't deny the pressure building around her. Every part of her life, her job, her home, her reputation, was under attack. And through it all, Victor watched from his penthouse office, sipping whiskey by the window. His reflection glared back at him, twisted into a smile. "Let's see how long you last now," he muttered. The restaurant staff felt the strain, too. Customers still came in, eager to meet the fearless waitress, but supplies ran short. Some nights they had to turn people away. The manager's hand shook as he counted the cash register, wondering how long they could stay open under the mounting pressure. One evening, as Maya polished glasses at the bar, Mr. Lewis pulled her aside. His eyes were tired, his voice low. "Maya, maybe you should step back. Just for a while. Victor's targeting you, not the rest of us. If you leave, maybe this all dies down." Maya's heart ached. She understood his fear. But she also knew stepping back wouldn't end Victor's cruelty. It would only feed it. "Mr. Lewis," she said softly, "if I walk away now, he wins. And if he wins, he'll just find the next person to crush. I can't let that happen." The older man sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're braver than all of us put together. But bravery doesn't pay bills. And it doesn't stop men like him." Maya looked at him, her voice steady. "Maybe not, but it shows people they don't have to bow. And sometimes that's enough to change things." The fourth strike came like lightning. One evening, as Maya finished her shift, two suited men approached her outside the restaurant. Their smiles were thin, their eyes cold. "Miss," one said smoothly, "Mr. Dellington would like to make you an offer. A generous one. Walk away from your job. Stop talking to reporters. Stay out of sight. In return, you'll receive enough money to take care of your family for life." Maya's stomach tightened. "And if I say no?" The man's smile vanished. "Then you'll learn what happens when people refuse Mr. Dellington's generosity." They slipped a card into her hand and walked away, disappearing into the night. Maya stared at the card, her pulse racing. She thought of her mother's medicine, Daniel's tuition, the eviction notice ticking down like a clock. For a moment, temptation whispered, maybe she could take the money. Maybe it would solve everything. But then she remembered the look on Victor's face the night she had stood her ground. The rage, the disbelief, the crack in his untouchable image. He wanted her silence more than anything. And that was exactly why she couldn't give it to him. She tore the card in half and dropped it into the trash. The attacks continued, each one sharper than the last. But as the days turned into weeks, something else began to grow stronger too. Support. The same guests who had clapped for her that night returned again and again, leaving big tips, offering kind words, and posting online about their experiences. Other restaurants reached out, sharing stories of staff who had been bullied by Victor in the past. Workers from hotels, offices, and shops sent messages thanking Maya for giving them courage. What Victor didn't realize was that the harder he pushed to silence her, the louder her story became. And though Maya's nights grew heavy with worry, her days were filled with something stronger than fear, resolve. Because she now understood something Victor never could. Power built on fear was fragile. And when fear breaks, power falls. The night ended, but the story didn't. By morning, the confrontation at Dellington's favorite restaurant had already begun to spread like wildfire. It started with a handful of guests who filmed the encounter on their phones. Victor's rage, his cruel words, and most importantly, Maya's calm defiance. Clips circulated across social media, first in whispers, then in waves. The video was only a few minutes long, but it carried more weight than hours of speeches. People watched as a billionaire hurled insults in glass, and then they watched a young waitress refuse to bow. Respect goes both ways. I serve food, not fear. Money can't buy decency. Maya's words became quotes plastered on timelines, reposted with hashtags that trended within hours. Hashtag stand your ground. Hashtag respect over fear. Hashtag Dellington defeated. By noon, the video had millions of views. News outlets picked it up. Talk shows debated it. Opinion columns poured in from every corner of the internet. Some called Maya a hero. Others questioned how much power the wealthy should really hold in society. For the first time in years, Victor wasn't the one controlling the narrative. He had always been untouchable, his wealth shielding him from public scrutiny. He could humiliate a waiter, dismiss an assistant, fire an entire staff, and no one would dare speak out. But now, the world was watching, and the world wasn't impressed. Meanwhile, Maya was at home, sitting at the small kitchen table with her younger brother, Daniel. Their mother dozed in the bedroom, recovering after another long night of pain. Daniel scrolled on his phone, his eyes wide. Maya, you're everywhere. Look, news anchors are talking about you. They're calling you the fearless waitress. Maya shook her head in disbelief. I didn't do anything special. I just couldn't let him treat us that way. That's exactly why people care, Daniel replied, his voice full of pride. You didn't shout, you didn't back down, you just told the truth. Everyone's saying they wish they had your courage. Her phone buzzed again and again. Messages from strangers thanking her. Staff from other restaurants sharing their own stories of being mistreated by the wealthy. Even a few CEOs praising her words about dignity. But not all the attention was kind. Among the praise came warnings. Anonymous messages telling her to be careful. Articles speculating about Victor's next move. One headline blared, "Billionaire humiliated, will he strike back?" And Victor? He was fuming. In his penthouse office overlooking the city, Victor Dellington slammed his fists onto his polished desk. His PR team hovered nervously, showing him headline after headline, tweet after tweet. "She's making you look weak, sir," one advisor said cautiously. "She's a waitress." Victor bellowed. "A nobody, and now the world thinks she's stronger than me." The room fell silent. No one dared answer. Victor's jaw clenched. "Find her," he ordered. "Find her, and make sure she never works again. I don't care how. I want her begging in the streets before the week is over." His team nodded, terrified. But deep down they wondered if even Victor's power could smother the wildfire the story had become. Back at the restaurant, things had changed, too. Customers flocked in, not just for the food, but to meet the waitress who had stood her ground. Maya couldn't walk across the dining hall without someone thanking her, shaking her hand, or slipping her notes of encouragement. The staff, once timid and weary, carried themselves differently now. They joked more. They looked customers in the eye. Even the manager, Mr. Lewis, found a little backbone, politely refusing to bend to unreasonable requests. It was as though Maya's courage had unlocked something in everyone. But Maya herself wasn't basking in fame. She was worried. The stares, the cameras outside, the endless questions. It all felt overwhelming. She hadn't meant to become a symbol. She just wanted to do her job without bowing to cruelty. One night, as she walked home, a woman stopped her on the street. She was dressed in a hotel uniform, her tired eyes lighting up when she recognized Maya. "You don't know me," the woman said, "but I saw what you did. I clean rooms at a big hotel uptown, and people treat us like dirt. Watching you, it gave me hope. For the first time, I feel like maybe I can speak up too." Maya's heart ached at the words. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger. The ripple effect was real. But with it came risk. The restaurant received anonymous phone calls warning them to fire Maya or face consequences. Delivery trucks arrived late. Suppliers suddenly doubled prices, and health inspectors showed up unannounced with clipboards in hand. It didn't take a genius to guess who was behind it. Victor hadn't forgotten. He hadn't forgiven. Still, Maya refused to shrink. Every day, she tied her apron, lifted her chin, and worked her shift with the same quiet dignity that had sparked a movement. Because deep down, she knew the truth. Power wasn't about fear. It wasn't about money. It was about courage. And courage, once lit, spreads faster than fire. For a long, suspended moment after the restaurant doors slammed shut, the only sound was the echo of Victor's rage reverberating in the air. Then, slowly, the thunder of applause filled the space again. Louder this time, stronger, unafraid. Every guest in the dining hall clapped, some even rising to their feet. Their eyes weren't on the door where Victor had left. Their eyes were on Maya. The young waitress stood still, her chest rising and falling as she tried to process what had just happened. She had stared down one of the most powerful men in the city and had not broken. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, her hands tingling with the effort it had taken not to tremble in front of him. But what shocked her most was not her own composure. It was the way the room had changed. Just minutes ago, this restaurant had been a place of fear. Every waiter, every chef, every manager moved like shadows under Victor's watchful eyes, terrified of making the smallest mistake. Guests had learned to keep their heads down, whispering quietly whenever the billionaire unleashed one of his infamous tirades. Now, that same room was alive with courage. People clapped, smiled, even laughed softly as though a heavy chain had been lifted from their necks. The manager, Mr. Lewis, stood frozen for a moment before hurrying to Maya's side. His voice trembled. Maya, I don't know what to say. I've worked here 20 years, and no one has ever dared. Speak to him like that? Maya finished gently, offering a faint smile. Mr. Lewis nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Yes, exactly that. You don't understand. He owns half the businesses on this block. He funds the mayor's campaigns. If he wanted to, he could shut this place down with a single phone call. Maya's smile faded slightly. She knew the truth in those words. Victor's wealth wasn't just money. It was influence, a weapon sharper than any blade. And she had just made herself his target. But before doubt could creep in, a woman from one of the nearest tables approached. She was elegantly dressed, her pearls glimmering under the chandelier. She reached out, touched Maya's hand gently, and said, "Thank you. I've watched that man humiliate staff here for years. And no one ever dared to stop him, until you." Others followed. A middle-aged man shook his head in disbelief. "What you said about dignity, it hit me. My company's been bending over backward for people like him. Maybe we've been wrong to call that respect." Another guest added, "You reminded us tonight that money doesn't make a man better. Character does." And he showed us his. The words washed over Maya like waves. She hadn't spoken up for applause or recognition. She'd spoken up because her soul wouldn't let her stay silent. Yet here were strangers, finding courage in her defiance. Meanwhile, in the corner of the restaurant, the kitchen staff peeked out nervously. The head chef, his white coat stained from the long night's work, walked out slowly, his eyes wet with emotion. "You defended me," he said quietly, his voice thick. "When he insulted my food, when he insulted me, you stood up, even though it wasn't your fight." Maya smiled softly. It was everyone's fight. No one deserves to be treated like that. The chef nodded, his lips pressed tightly as though holding back tears. He extended his hand, rough and callous from years of chopping and stirring. Maya shook it firmly, and for the first time, she felt the bond of solidarity running through the restaurant. But not everyone shared the celebration. The manager still looked pale, wringing his hands nervously. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Victor doesn't lose. He'll come back. And when he does, he won't just come for you. He'll come for all of us." The mood dipped for a moment. The truth of those words was heavy. The applause quieted, and uncertainty rippled through the staff. Maya took a deep breath. She didn't deny the danger, but she also refused to let fear reclaim the room. Then we'll face him together, she said firmly. We can't spend our lives bowing to a man who feeds on our fear. Tonight, we showed him that respect can't be bought or forced. And if he returns, we'll remind him again. Silence followed her words. Then, slowly, the staff began to nod. The busboys, the waitresses, even the dishwasher, who usually avoided everyone's eyes, lifted his head. For the first time, they felt like more than employees. They felt like a team. The guests seemed equally moved. Some of them pulled out their phones, already typing furiously, no doubt spreading the story online. Others whispered to one another about how they would no longer tolerate Victor's behavior in their own circles. A spark had been lit, and it was spreading. Maya finally allowed herself a small sigh of relief. She glanced at the broken glass on the floor, shards still glinting under the chandelier. A few moments ago, those pieces had symbolized humiliation, an order meant to break her. Now, they looked like victory. Still, she knew this wasn't the end. Victor's threats hadn't been empty. A man like him didn't forget insults. He didn't forgive defiance. If anything, his rage would double, and his retaliation would be ruthless. But as Maya looked around the restaurant, at the faces filled with admiration, gratitude, and a newfound bravery, she realized something important. She wasn't alone anymore. And sometimes, that was enough to stand against giants. The manager cleared his throat nervously. Maya, about your job. I'll understand if you don't want to stay after tonight. But I also want you to know you've given all of us more courage than we've had in years. Maya smiled faintly. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. I still need this job. She thought of her mother, of Daniel, of the bills stacked on the counter at home. But more than that, I need to show people like Victor that they can't win just by being loud. The applause started again, softer this time, but no less sincere. People weren't just clapping for what Maya had done. They were clapping for what she had awakened in them. The night wound down slowly. Guests finished their meals with smiles instead of whispers. Staff moved with lighter steps, no longer weighed down by fear. And Maya? She continued her shift, refilling glasses, delivering plates, and checking on tables as though nothing had happened. But everyone who looked at her knew the truth. Something had changed that night. A waitress had stood her ground. A billionaire had been silenced. And a restaurant had remembered what dignity looked like. Victor's laughter died as quickly as it began. His smile twisted into a sneer, and his eyes burned with something darker than mockery. Rage. The billionaire wasn't used to this. For years, he had ruled every room he entered. Politicians bent to his will. CEOs scrambled to please him, and ordinary people shrank under his insults. He was a storm, and everyone else was expected to scatter. But tonight was different. A waitress, had stood her ground against him. And worse, she had done it in front of an audience. Every second she remained unbroken was a bruise to his pride, and Victor Dellington did not tolerate bruises. As Maya set down the glass of water he ordered, he leaned forward suddenly, slamming his palm against the table so hard the cutlery rattled. "Do you think this is a game?" he thundered. "Do you think you can embarrass me in front of my people?" The restaurant went dead silent. Guests froze mid-bite, forks hovering in the air. The waitstaff held their breath. The manager's face had gone pale, sweat beating at his temple. Maya, however, remained steady. She didn't flinch at the sound of his booming voice, didn't retreat from the table. She simply placed the water in front of him and said, "I'm not here to embarrass you, sir. I'm here to serve you. But I won't be spoken to like I'm beneath you." Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp, but it carried, clear and unshaken, across the dining hall. Victor's hand curled into a fist. His pride screamed for him to destroy her, utterly and completely. If he didn't, the illusion of his untouchable power would crack, and cracks could spread fast. He seized a glass of water and, without warning, hurled it across the room. The liquid splashed onto the marble floor, the glass shattering into pieces that scattered at Maya's feet. Gasps erupted from the guests. A child at one table whimpered. The manager rushed forward, his voice trembling. "And Mr. Dellington, please, there's no need." "Silence!" Victor roared, turning his fury on the man. The manager recoiled like a scolded dog, retreating instantly. Victor turned back to Maya, his voice a growl. "Pick it up." The command hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew what it meant. He wasn't asking her to clean up. He was demanding her submission, her humiliation. For a moment, Maya looked down at the broken glass. She thought of her bills, her mother's medicine, her brother's schooling. Walking away might mean losing this job. Bending down to obey might mean losing her dignity. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest. Then, slowly, she lifted her head and met Victor's burning eyes. "No," she said quietly but firmly. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Victor's face turned crimson. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no, sir," Maya repeated, her voice stronger now. "I'm a waitress, not your servant. If you spill something, you clean it yourself. Respect goes both ways." The words cut through the air like a blade. Victor shot up from his chair, towering over her. His shadow fell across her face as he leaned in, his voice dripping venom. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Maya didn't move an inch. "I know exactly who you are. A man who thinks money gives him the right to disrespect others. But money can't buy decency." The guests gasped again, louder this time. Some of them, who had once admired Victor for his wealth, now exchanged looks of disgust. Others sat on the edge of their seats, captivated by the unfolding confrontation. The billionaire's chest heaved as his rage boiled over. He wasn't used to losing arguments, and certainly not to someone society told him should be invisible. The fact that this woman dared to challenge him felt like an insult greater than any he had ever endured. "You're finished here," Victor spat. "You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it." The manager stepped forward nervously. "Maya, maybe you should—" But before he could finish, Maya raised her hand gently, stopping him. She never looked away from Victor. "If you want to fire me, that's fine," she said. "But understand this. Taking away someone's job doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you cruel. And the world sees cruelty for what it is." Victor's nostrils flared. He wanted to shout, to curse, to crush her under the weight of his power. But something unexpected happened. The guests began to clap. It started with one man at the back of the room, then a woman at the front, then more and more until the restaurant filled with the sound of applause. Not for Victor. For Maya. Victor's eyes darted around in shock. The applause wasn't polite. It was defiant. The guests weren't afraid of him in this moment. They were inspired by her. His face twisted with fury. He slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like thunder. "Enough!" he bellowed. But the clapping didn't stop. Maya stood tall, her chin raised, her expression calm. For the first time in years, Victor realized he wasn't the most powerful person in the room, and that realization stung more than anything else. He glared at her one last time, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this." Then he stormed out of the restaurant, his bodyguards scrambling after him. The heavy doors slammed shut behind him, leaving the dining hall buzzing with energy. The guests turned their attention back to Maya, their faces filled with admiration and gratitude. The staff, who had lived in fear of Victor for years, looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. And Maya? She simply exhaled, her shoulders relaxing at last. She wasn't sure what would come next, whether she'd still have a job tomorrow, whether Victor would make good on his threats. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. She hadn't bent. She hadn't broken. And for the first time, the billionaire had walked away defeated. The second steak sat steaming on Victor's table, its aroma wafting through the restaurant. Most customers would have dug in gratefully, but not Victor Dellington. He wasn't hungry for food. He was hungry for power. His eyes flicked to Maya, who stood a few feet away, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't tremble, didn't look away, didn't show the slightest crack in her composure. That irritated him. Victor thrived on breaking people. He liked to see their confidence drain away, their smiles falter, their hands shake as they stumbled through apologies. Yet here was this young waitress, refusing to play her part. "Well," Victor said loudly so that nearby tables could hear, "let's see if the replacement is any better. Though I doubt it. Competence is such a rare thing these days. He carved a piece of steak with theatrical precision, placed it in his mouth, and chewed slowly, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. He swallowed, slammed his fork down, and barked. Still awful. A murmur rippled through the room. The head chef, watching nervously from the kitchen door, clenched his fists. The manager started forward again, but Victor raised a hand to silence him. "No excuses," Victor boomed. "This is supposed to be the city's best restaurant. Yet you can't even cook a steak properly? Tell me, little waitress," his voice dropped into a mocking drawl, "did you make this yourself? Or did you just stand around smiling while your incompetent chef ruined it?" The insult hit hard. The chef lowered his head, shame burning his cheeks. Other waiters shuffled uncomfortably, wishing they could disappear. But Maya didn't falter. She stepped closer, her voice calm. "The chef prepared your meal, sir. He works very hard, as does the whole kitchen team. If it isn't to your taste, I can have another made." Her tone wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It was steady, like a rock in a raging storm. Victor's smirk widened. He had found her limit, he thought. Now he just had to push harder. "Oh, how noble," he sneered, his voice rising so the entire restaurant could hear. "Defending your little friends in the kitchen. Tell me, waitress, how much do they pay you here? A few dollars an hour? Is that what your dignity is worth?" Smiling, bowing, running around like a servant for scraps. The words cut deep. Several guests glanced at Maya sympathetically, while others looked away, too uncomfortable to watch. This was cruelty laid bare, an attack not just on her work, but on her worth as a person. For a split second, Maya felt her chest tighten. She thought of her mother, pale in her hospital bed. She thought of Daniel, sitting at the kitchen table at home, his school books spread out, waiting for her to come home with money for his tuition. She thought of the bills stacked high on the counter, threatening to drown them. Victor's words could have broken her, but they didn't. Instead, Maya took a quiet breath, straightened her shoulders, and met his gaze head-on. "No, sir," she said firmly. "My dignity isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in how I choose to treat others. And nothing you say can take that away from me." The words rang through the restaurant like a bell. Guests froze. The staff gaped. For the first time in years, someone had spoken back to Victor Dellington, and not with anger, but with truth. Victor blinked. His smirk faltered, just for a second, before he leaned back in his chair and let out a sharp laugh. "Impressive," he said mockingly. "You actually believe that nonsense, don't you? Dignity? Respect? Those are luxuries for the poor to comfort themselves with. The only thing that matters is power. And I have it. You don't." He picked up his glass of wine, swirling it dramatically. "Look around, girl. Everyone here fears me. They obey me. That's real respect." Maya shook her head gently. "That isn't respect, sir. That's fear. And fear fades the moment people realize you can't control them." Gasps filled the room. A couple sitting nearby clapped their hands over their mouths in shock. The head chef peeked out again, eyes wide with something close to admiration. Victor slammed his glass down, wine sloshing over the rim. His face darkened, his jaw clenched. "You're bold," he growled. "But boldness without sense is foolishness. Do you really think you can stand against me?" Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't waver. "I'm not standing against you, sir. I'm standing for myself. And for everyone here who deserves to be treated with decency." For the first time that night, the balance of power shifted. The staff, who usually shrank under Victor's gaze, lifted their heads a little. The guests, who usually ignored the billionaire's cruelty, leaned forward, intrigued. The silence in the room wasn't fear anymore, it was anticipation. Victor realized it too. His game wasn't going as planned. Instead of breaking her, Maya was breaking the script. She wasn't supposed to fight back, and yet here she was, calmly dismantling the foundation of his arrogance. And the worst part? People were listening. He had to regain control. Victor stood abruptly, his towering frame casting a shadow over Maya. He pointed a finger at her, his voice booming. "Careful, girl. You're one mistake away from losing this job. Do you really want to gamble your family's bread on your pride?" Maya's heart skipped at the mention of family. He didn't know her struggles, but his words hit close. Still, she held her ground. With all due respect, sir, she replied softly, a job that forces me to bow to cruelty isn't worth keeping. I serve food, not fear. The restaurant erupted in whispers. Some guests even clapped quietly under their tables. The staff exchanged glances of disbelief, half terrified, half inspired. Victor's face turned crimson. He wasn't used to losing. Not like this. Not in front of an audience. For a long moment he glared at her, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. Everyone braced for the explosion, but instead he did something no one expected. He laughed. Loud, booming laughter that echoed across the room. You've got guts, I'll give you that, he said, shaking his head. Most of the rats here would sell their souls for my money. But you're different. He sat back down, his smirk returning, though less certain now. Fine, let's continue. Bring me water, room temperature, no ice. And let's see if you can handle something that simple. It was another test, another trap, another attempt to humiliate. But as Maya turned toward the counter, her steps calm and unhurried, the staff realized something extraordinary. For the first time ever, Victor Dellington wasn't the one in control. Victor Dellington leaned back in his chair, like a king expecting tribute. His golden cufflinks glimmered under the chandelier, and his cold eyes swept the room, daring anyone to keep his gaze. Waiters avoided looking at him, retreating to safe corners, while guests spoke in hushed tones, careful not to draw his attention. But Maya didn't know fear the way the others did. She walked toward him steadily, notepad in hand, her expression calm but confident. Good evening, sir, she said, her voice soft yet clear. May I take your order? For a heartbeat, silence filled the space between them. Victor tilted his head, studying her like a predator who had just spotted unfamiliar prey. Well, he drawled finally, his lips twisting into a smirk. A new face. How refreshing. Let's see how long you last before you crack. The staff, watching from a distance, winced. They had heard these words before. This was how Victor started his game. A game of humiliation he always won. But Maya's face didn't change. She simply asked politely, What would you like to order this evening, sir? Victor narrowed his eyes. No stammering? No nervous glances? This one was different. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table. Are you deaf or just slow? I said, I want the best steak in this miserable place. Medium rare. And make it quick. I don't have time to wait for incompetence. His voice cut through the restaurant, sharp enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Guests lowered their eyes, embarrassed on her behalf. Other waiters stiffened, waiting for the moment she would falter. But Maya didn't flinch. She wrote down his order calmly and replied, Right away, sir. That simple response seemed to throw Victor off balance for a second. Usually, his insults left servers flustered, apologizing desperately. This girl, however, carried herself with a quiet strength, as if his words couldn't reach her. When she returned with the steak minutes later, placing it gently in front of him, Victor smirked. Finally, let's see if the chef got it right this time. He picked up his knife, sliced into meat, and took a deliberate bite. He chewed slowly, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. Then, with a dramatic scowl, he spat the piece onto his plate. Disgusting! He snapped, slamming his fork down. Do you people even know how to cook? I've eaten dog food that tasted better than this garbage. The words sliced through the air. The head chef peeked from the kitchen door, face flushing with shame. The manager hurried forward, already muttering apologies. But before he could speak, Maya's voice broke the silence. If it isn't to your liking, sir, she said evenly, I'll gladly replace it. But I don't think it's fair to insult the people who worked hard to prepare your meal. The restaurant froze. You could have heard a pin drop. No one had ever spoken to Victor Dellington like that. Victor's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed into slits. His jaw tightened, and his voice dropped into a dangerous growl. What did you just say to me? Maya met his gaze without hesitation. I said, if there's an issue, I'll fix it. But respect works both ways, sir. My team deserved that much. Gasps rippled across the dining hall. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Some even sat straighter, curious to see how this bold waitress would survive what came next. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her like one might study an insect that refused to be crushed. He was used to fear. He was used to obedience. But this young woman stood before him calm, steady, unshaken. "You must not know who I am," Victor said finally, his voice booming so loudly that waiters flinched. "I know you're a customer," Maya replied, her voice firm but respectful. "And every customer deserves good service. But service does not mean surrendering dignity." The staff froze in horror. The manager's hand flew to his forehead, already imagining the disaster that was about to follow. But something strange happened. Victor didn't explode. Not yet. Instead, he chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "You've got a mouth on you," he sneered. "Most people around here know better than to test me." Maya said nothing. She only stood tall, waiting for his response. Victor picked up his knife again, cut another piece of steak, and tasted it. This time, he chewed thoughtfully, his eyes still locked on hers. He swallowed, slammed his fork down once more, and barked, "Replace it, now, and make sure it's edible this time." The manager rushed forward. "Right away, Mr. Dellington, right away." But Victor raised a hand, silencing him. "Not you, her. I want her to handle it." The staff exchanged worried glances. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was a test, a trap. Victor wanted to break her, and everyone knew it. Maya inclined her head slightly. "As you wish, sir." She picked up the plate and walked calmly back to the kitchen. The whispers began immediately. "She's finished. He's going to tear her apart. She doesn't know what she's dealing with." But in the kitchen, Maya only set the plate down and spoke gently to the chef. "Could you please prepare another one? Medium rare, just as he ordered." The chef hesitated. "Maya, do you know what you just did out there?" "Yes," she said simply. "I did my job." When she carried the fresh plate back to Victor, the weight of the entire restaurant seemed to rest on her shoulders. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. She set it down gracefully. "Here you are, sir. I hope this suits you better." Victor cut into the steak again, slowly, deliberately. He took a bite, chewed, and leaned back in his chair. His expression was unreadable. For a long, tense moment, the room held its breath. And then Victor smiled, a cruel, amused smile. "Interesting," he murmured. "You're not afraid of me. I like that." He didn't praise the food. He didn't apologize for his insults. But in his own twisted way, he acknowledged something nobody else had ever forced him to see: resistance. And though the night was far from over, one truth was already clear. Maya had passed the first test. Maya adjusted the black apron around her waist, smoothed down her crisp white shirt, and took a deep breath. This was it. Her first day at La Royale. The restaurant wasn't just another workplace. It was a city's crown jewel of fine dining. Its walls were lined with golden mirrors. The chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and the smell of roasted herbs and freshly baked bread seemed to wrap around every guest like a warm embrace. For Maya, even walking to the front doors felt surreal. She had dreamed of this chance for weeks. The truth was, Maya hadn't lived an easy life. At just 23, she carried more responsibility than most people twice her age. Her father had left when she was young, and her mother had been struggling with illness for years. That left Maya as the backbone of the family. She worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, babysitting, selling homemade food. Anything to keep food on the table for her younger brother, Daniel. Daniel was only 12, smart as a whip, and full of dreams about becoming an engineer one day. But dreams didn't come cheap. School fees, uniforms, books, they all added up. And then there was her mother's hospital bills, which seemed to grow like vines around her neck, choking the little savings she managed to scrape together. So when Maya saw a help wanted sign outside La Royale 2 weeks earlier, her heart leaped. It wasn't just any restaurant. It was a place where the city's richest and most powerful came to dine. Tips alone could pay a month's rent. A steady job here meant stability, maybe even hope. The interview hadn't been easy. The manager, a tall man with graying hair named Mr. Collins, had eyed her skeptically. "This is not a place of beginners," he had warned. Our guests are demanding. They expect perfection. Maya had straightened her shoulders and replied softly but firmly, I can learn. I'm a quick study, and I promise, no matter how hard it gets, I won't give up. Something in her tone, an honesty that couldn't be faked, convinced him to give her a chance. And now here she was, standing in the gleaming staff room, tying her apron as the other waiters bustled past, already seasoned in the restaurant's dance of service. From the moment her shift began, Maya absorbed everything like a sponge. She memorized the table numbers, learned how to balance trays with 3 wine glasses at once, and practiced quiet, respectful tone the staff use when speaking to guests. Remember, one older waitress whispered to her, you're invisible until you're needed. Move smoothly, speak gently, and don't ever argue with a customer. Maya nodded. She understood. Service was about patience and humility. But humility didn't mean humiliation. At least, not in her eyes. By the time evening rolled around, the restaurant filled with its usual glamour. Sparkling jewelry, tailored suits, perfumes that cost more than an average person's monthly salary. Maya moved carefully between tables, placing bread baskets, pouring water, and offering practiced smiles. Her hands trembled at first, but with each successful task, her confidence grew. She even allowed herself a small thought, maybe this job will work out. Maybe I can do this. But then the atmosphere shifted. The door swung open, and the sound of footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Conversations dimmed. A hush spread like a wave. Maya noticed the change instantly. Waiters stiffened, the manager's smile faltered, and a nervous tension crept into the room. She followed their eyes and saw him, Victor Dellington. She had heard the name before. Of course, everyone in the city had. But she hadn't yet connected the stories with the man. He was taller than she expected, with broad shoulders and a sharp, angular face. His suit was perfectly cut. His gold watch gleamed under the chandelier, and he walked with the air of someone who believed the world itself belonged to him. Guests looked away quickly, pretending not to notice, though their stiff postures betrayed their unease. Victor slid into his usual corner seat, the prime table reserved only for him, and tapped his fingers impatiently on the polished wood. He didn't look around. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew his presence dictated the room. Maya frowned slightly. She didn't understand why the air felt so heavy, why the staff moved with almost frantic urgency now. Then Mr. Collins, the manager, hurried over to her side. His voice was low, tense. Maya, listen to me carefully. That man over there, Victor Dellington, he's particular. Serve him carefully, and whatever happens, don't talk back. Just smile, nod, and keep moving. Maya blinked. Is he dangerous? Dangerous. Mr. Collins hesitated. Not in the way you're thinking. But he has power. He can make your life very difficult if you upset him. Maya tilted her head. To her, a customer was a customer. Yes, this man was rich, but that didn't make him different from anyone else who needed food served on their plate. She simply nodded and said, I understand. But in truth, she didn't fully understand. Not yet. She had dealt with rude people before. She had dealt with rejection, insults, even customers who tried to cheat her when she sold food on the street. None of it had broken her. None of it had stopped her from holding her head high. So how bad could one rich man really be? The staff watched her nervously as she picked up her notepad and pen. They whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. She doesn't know what she's walking into. She's new. She's about to learn the hard way. Poor girl. She'll regret this. But Maya didn't hear them. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and began walking toward Victor's table. Her footsteps were steady, her expression calm. This was her first day. She wanted to prove herself. She wanted to show she could handle any guest, no matter how difficult. She wanted to make sure she didn't lose this job, because losing it wasn't an option. With every step closer, she thought of her mother in the hospital bed, of Daniel's hopeful eyes when he talked about school, of the bills stacked on the kitchen counter back home. She wasn't just carrying a tray. She was carrying her family's future. And in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter who this man is, no matter what he says, I will not let him break me. When she finally reached the table, she bowed her head slightly and spoke in the calm, polite voice she had practiced. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" The word seemed simple enough, but to the staff watching from afar, it was the beginning of a storm they knew all too well. Victor Dellington raised his eyes slowly, studying the young woman before him. His lips curled into a smirk, and the cruel glint in his eyes suggested only one thing. He had found his next target. And on Maya's very first day, she was about to face the test of her life. Victor Dellington was not the kind of man you admired. Yes, he was rich, unbelievably rich. His name was attached to hotels that gleamed like palaces, shopping malls that swallowed entire city blocks, and office towers so tall they seemed to scrape the heavens. Newspapers called him a self-made genius. Business channels labeled him the king of real estate. His face often appeared on magazine covers, jawline sharp, eyes cold, with headlines praising his success story. But inside the city, behind the glitter and the headlines, ordinary people whispered something very different. He's cruel. He's arrogant. He'll crush you if you cross him. Victor wasn't known for building people up. He was known for tearing them down. When he walked into a room, silence always followed. Not because people respected him, but because they feared him. His reputation was built not only on business deals, but on the scars he left behind. Humiliated employees, terrified waiters, and small business owners who had been forced to sell him for pennies because they couldn't survive his ruthless tactics. At La Royale, the restaurant where the wealthy gathered, his presence was infamous. Every waiter had a story. One young server recalled the night Victor hurled a glass of wine across the room because it was too warm. Another remembered being screamed at for not pulling out his chair fast enough. A hostess once quit on the spot after Victor mocked her accent in front of 50 guests. Even the head chef, who had cooked for prime ministers, once retreated in shame after Victor declared his 5-star meal trash fit only for pigs. It wasn't just his words, but the way he said them. He had a voice that cut through the air, dripping with superiority, as though every syllable was dipped in poison. His insults were deliberate, sharp enough to pierce pride and deep enough to leave lasting scars. And the cruelest part? Victor enjoyed it. It was never really about the food or the service or the details. It was about control. He liked watching people squirm, like testing their limits, like knowing that his money gave him the power to belittle anyone he wanted. He would lean back in his chair, smirk on his face, as the staff stammered apologies and scrambled to fix his demands. He thrived on their fear, and everyone played along. Why? Because Victor wasn't just another customer. He was powerful. His businesses employed thousands in the city. He had connections with politicians, bankers, and media tycoons. If he wanted, he could have the restaurant shut down with a single phone call. Nobody dared to push back. That's why, whenever he arrived, the staff at La Royale went into survival mode. Conversations among the waiters would sound like warnings before a storm. Don't look him in the eye. Don't speak unless he asks you. Don't argue, ever. Victor was like a lion wandering into a village. You didn't fight him. You just hoped he would leave quickly without destroying too much. But the truth was, the staff hated serving him. They hated the way he clicked his fingers to summon them like dogs. They hated the way he made them feel small, invisible, unworthy. They hated the way he made a luxury restaurant, a place of beauty and pride, feel like a battlefield. And yet, they couldn't escape. The manager knew that Victor's name alone brought attention. Wealthy guests often booked tables just to say they dined in the same room as him. His reviews, though cruel, could make or break reputations. La Royale couldn't afford to lose him, even if keeping him meant sacrificing the dignity of their staff. That night, whispers spread quickly through the restaurant as soon as Victor appeared. His sharp cologne filled the air before he even reached his table. His heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor. His gold cufflinks glistened under the chandelier light. A group of waiters huddled near the bar, pretending to arrange glasses, but really whispering nervously. "Not again," one muttered. "Who's taking him tonight?" Another asked. "Not me." A third said quickly, shaking his head. The manager scanned the room anxiously, sweat forming at his temples. He knew no one wanted the job, But he also knew that denying Victor's service was unthinkable. It was a curse. Every time Victor came in, the same dread filled the air. The staff felt like prisoners serving a king who enjoyed punishing them. But that night, something was different. There was a new waitress, Maya. She didn't know the stories yet. She hadn't lived through the nightmares the others had endured. To her, Victor was just another customer. A wealthy man, perhaps rude, but nothing she couldn't handle with courtesy and professionalism. The manager's eyes landed on her, and for a moment, he considered sparing her. She was new. She didn't deserve to face Victor so soon. But then again, maybe her innocence would buy them a little time. Maybe Victor would be easier on someone fresh. Maya, the manager whispered, tugging her sleeve. That man in the corner table, he's yours. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She followed his gaze and saw Victor, seated like a king surveying his kingdom. He was tapping his golden watch impatiently, scanning the room with cold, calculating eyes. Maya didn't understand the full weight of what she was walking into. She only nodded, straightened her uniform, and picked up her notepad. The staff exchanged horrified looks. Some wanted to warn her, but their lips stayed shut. They knew it wouldn't matter. Once you were assigned to Victor's table, there was no escape. One of the older waiters whispered under his breath, "Poor girl. She won't last 5 minutes." But they were wrong, because Maya was not like the others. She had spent her life standing firm against storms far worse than Victor Dellington. And tonight, in a restaurant filled with people who bowed to money and power, she would do what nobody else dared, look him in the eye and refuse to break.